Hey friends, happy winter and welcome to an extra long episode to carry you on through the new year. As a Chinese medicine practitioner, I don't just practice it, I align my whole life as best I can with it. Since we're in winter and heading towards the solstice pretty quickly, I'm moving into a natural hibernation mode. It happens every year. It's pretty natural for me. What this means is I am going to take a 4-week break, maybe a little more, uh, from the inspired to allow this time to just be inward with myself, with my family, and let's be honest, sleep as much as I can. If you aren't already subscribed to Yinspired, please head over to substack.com and look for us at Yinspired, Yinspired, and subscribe to get the follow-up newsletter with all those links to my favorite podcast episodes, not of the Inspired, but of others I've listened to in 2025. But on to today's episode. Today, this extra long episode with Catie Oliveira. She's an experienced yoga teacher who has dedicated her life to finding healing and balance through yoga and Vedic wisdom. In a world where more and more people are exposed to cultural practices, we have patients and providers referring people to practices like yoga that might be out of our understanding. Or more likely, we think we know what it is, but our knowledge or our preconceived notions are limited, maybe even wrong. I'm seeing more healthcare providers recommend yoga to their patients, but what we all need to know is that not all yoga is the same. In fact, as we discuss in today's conversation, the simple recommendation of sending your client or patient to a yoga class may actually exacerbate their condition, especially when we begin to look at it through balancing properties like hot and cold or yin and yang. One of the objectives of Yinspired is to have conversations with different practitioners, providers, and patients who are steeped in these cultural traditions, allowing us to learn more and broaden our understanding of what our patients, what ourselves might be engaging in, and how those practices, rituals, or medicines are affecting overall health, and or in Chinese medicine term, pattern diagnosis. While this conversation revolves mostly around yoga on and off the mat in the 21st century in the United States, it really applies to anyone engaging in somatic or body-based practices like Qigong, Tai Chi. From the surface, it seems like we're talking about an external practice. But as you will see, we're talking about an approach to how we move our body, not just in a practice, but in life. What is our posture? How do we stand? What do we stand for? How do we sit? Do we rest? How do we move through the world? The integration of Vedic wisdom, of yoga and Ayurveda is near and dear to my life. It was through the path of yoga and Ayurveda that I fully committed to this path of Chinese medicine over 20 years ago. So for those of you who are fascinated or curious about today's conversation and you're looking for continuing education hours or units, I actually have 2 CEUs hosted by Net of Knowledge for licensed acupuncturists and yoga teachers that discuss the similarities and differences between yoga, Ayurveda, and Chinese medicine philosophy and practices. It is by no means a full PhD level CEU, but it is a great introduction, just enough to bring more awareness to how our patients' yoga practice may be influencing their health via a yin and yang perspective. Heads up, as we've already discussed, it's not always for the good or balancing. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting Yinspired. I hope this has touched your life in meaningful ways in 2025, and I look forward to bringing more episodes to you in 2026. From my heart to yours, enjoy this episode. Yinspired is dedicated to all the grandmothers and aunties whose voices weren't heard or listened to. Created for the daughters. Aloha and welcome back to Yinspired, a podcast celebrating different perspectives in Chinese medicine and integrative medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Haunani Chong Drake, a clinical doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, a licensed acupuncturist in the United States, a cultural practitioner and steward, mom, dog mama, and military spouse. Here, we have casual conversations with everyday practitioners, patients, and students exploring the messy truth of medicine, healing, the taboo, and life. We have made it. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest to Yinspired. Welcome to the pod, Catie Oliveira. I just want to let listeners know how special this episode is because you have known about there were maybe 3 people besides my husband that even knew I was floating this idea of a podcast, and you were
Mhm.
one of those people who knew, and you have been so gracious, supportive, and loving, and also kind of pushing me in the way that soul sisters do. And so to finally come full circle, here we are together, sharing space once again, but in a more public way. I think it's a little nervous for both of us. And yet, I am just so grateful for your willingness and your support to be here. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's really special, and you're just one of the most incredible humans on the face of the earth to me, and to see this be birthed and to have it go from an idea that we would joke about on our phone calls when we'd geek out and be like, you just got to have a podcast, and then have it like be a real thing. Here we are, and it's really beautiful. It's amazing. I'm so proud of you, and I'm really, really honored to be here.
I know your time is so precious. You are also a mom. You have so many things going on in your life right now. So, from every cell in my body, thank you. As we discussed, a lot of this is very casual. You and I go way back. And so you have been there. You haven't moved with us, but as we have moved every 1 to 3 years around the globe, you have been one of those friends that is on my quick list to text when poop is hitting the fan, or there's
Mm.
something to celebrate, or I'm melting down, or have inspirational moments or aha moments. And sometimes just to be silly and to get our groove on with a fun dance party. We always somehow flow into conversations about things that are very personal, that affect our community, that touch the world, where we're confused, where we're celebrating. I don't know where this conversation is going to go today, but I do know that one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on as a guest is that the way that you see the world, your dedication to truly understanding self or humanity or what's going on in the world through the lens of yoga has been a thread that continues to unravel, to grow, to inspire. And that's an area that we actually haven't had a lot of conversation of on this podcast. I purposely waited for you to be that first person
Mhm.
to get to dive into a little more nuanced conversation about yoga and what yoga really is rather than what media or branding or consumerism has turned it into. Does that sound like are we
Yeah.
on the same page?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm here with
Awesome.
it.
Awesome. So I'll make sure to put a bio in the show notes, but for the listeners who don't know you, you mind just sharing a brief introduction
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
who you are, where you're at, what are you doing these days?
Yeah. So most people might have seen my name as Katie Naraki for many years. I've been a yoga teacher for about 20 years now. I think this is my 20th year officially. And was trained in integral yoga at the Satchidananda Ashram, Yogaville. And from there, I've been on a whole journey of, different yoga business ownership phases and stages, including a mobile children's yoga business. Then I owned a studio for years. And then for the last 10 years or so, have been deeply focusing on trauma informed and social justice informed yoga teacher trainings, both 200 and 300 hours. And that really became my baby and my passion project and my love. And I was doing that woven in with a nonprofit work that I was doing as an executive director. And so now I am taking a much needed break after so many years of so much Stira, which we'll get into how that shows up, and really coming back home to myself and taking some time to focus on my home and my body and my health and my family, and this different relationship with my yoga rather than the yogapreneur, grind and also still holding that deep commitment to my personal yoga practice throughout. So right now, to loop it back to that, I'm in a rest phase, but I live in Richmond, Virginia, and I do some pop up events here. My call right now has been to work with women or folks who identify in any way with the divine feminine, trans folks, anybody who feels like they'd like to do some work with our relationship to the feminine within. So I've been doing an event called Way of the Woman and then focusing on my music and other things lately.
What do you mean focusing in on your music?
Well,
Is there a
just
part of you I
playing.
don't even know? Are you
I mean, you've
recording?
seen some of it. No recording, no recording, but I'm writing some songs as they come through and yeah, getting more connected to playing my frame drum and my ukulele and yeah, just enjoying the creative phase that I'm in right now. Yeah.
I'm so excited for you because I feel like the way that you've been exploring music, you've always had incredible music taste, period. But the way that you're exploring it for yourself and how it wants to express through you has been really
Yeah.
inspiring to watch
Thank
you
you.
pick up new instruments and learn them and incorporate them and now vocalizing them to the public. I know that's not always the easiest part, right? It's like you could sit in your room all day and create and not share it with others, but to share it with others in ceremony and ritual for fun on the river is a whole
It's
different.
huge, huge, especially for those of us who have experienced, the silencing of the voice or feeling really afraid or like, oh, I'm not a naturally talented vocalist, so I shouldn't sing because I'm not really a singer. Oh, it's such a deep, deep process and such a yoga practice in itself, right?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's all the same teachings that would come into play, but now in how you express yourself.
Yeah, I want to make sure I include for those that are listening that really like credentials and stuff. Yeah, my educational background as far as like Yoga Alliance credential goes, I'm an ERYT 500 and then I'm several hundred hours into yoga therapy that I'm doing like the very slow and steady route to and going to take many years to get to trauma informed therapeutics and I have many years as a children's yoga teacher and children's yoga teacher trainer, and then a lot of certifications from many different organizations, again, with the focus on like the nervous system and somatics and polyvagal theory and yeah, trauma sensitive yoga in particular spaces, as far as with victims of different forms of abuse, with veterans and with underprivileged, underserved, marginalized communities, so on and so on.
Thank you for sharing that. For I think I understand when you say all that, but that's a lot of new jargon for some people, and when I say yoga has been commercialized, what people think of yoga when they hear the word, I would assume is a lot of the postural yoga. I'm hoping you can broaden that definition for us. When you say a yoga training and yoga, actually, what are you from a trained perspective for someone who has dedicated their life and you have a very deep devotional practice to these lineages, plural? What is yoga? What are we talking about when we say that word?
I think what comes to mind first is this saying that I used to hear, my mom or others say of like, there's no manual to life. Like, we're just figuring it out. Obviously, there's room for a lot of updating over the last thousands of years, but I look at yoga as instructions for life, the way that we live our life, and the asanas are positions, and it's all reflective of the many different positions and roles that we hold in our life. And so, whether it's standing at the sink doing dishes, or it's in our roles as CEOs or employees or mothers or wives or sisters, daughters, et cetera, et cetera. It's really how we're showing up and then how we're able to integrate, all these things that are happening all around us, all of the many lessons, all of the like, how do I learn how to be a human in this world? And there's just so much influence from all over. And yoga gives us a framework for coming to our center. And from that center, also our breath originating there from our center, then we're able to learn how to move through these different positions in our lives, how to stand, how to rest. And when I say stand, I mean like how to stand for something. What do you stand for? Standing up for yourself, standing on your own 2 feet, and then also knowing when to lay down and savasana, corpse pose, let it all die and rest. So it's all reflective of that. And I think, it's come to this place of where we often look at it as exercise. And what I believe is if that's what gets people into it, wonderful. If they're like, I think yoga would be great exercise, I'm going to do it. Wonderful. Welcome. Come on in. We want you here. And what most people find is that it's a way to learn how to live. The mat is just a reflection of, our lives that we're moving through every day, our homes, our workplaces, our globe, our earth, and the soil beneath us.
I love how you say stand up. How are we standing in life? Not just on our mat, right? Because a lot of people, you say the word yoga and people will have this image in their mind of a posture, whether it's attainable or not, whether it's for them or not. But it's that idea of there's that yoga mat and you're doing these postures, you're standing on it, you're moving on it, but using that as both a literal, but more importantly, the metaphoric and really the true heart of yoga, which is
Yeah.
a guide.
Mhm.
It's a philosophical guide, a map, we might say,
Mhm.
right? Like a map to navigate and help us move through this world from a place of knowing thyself, right? Like, who am I? What is this all about? What is my purpose? Why me in terms of like, why my past or why my family or why my trauma? And through that process, we get answers. We don't just have to sit there in an armchair and talk about it and conceptualize. It actually takes us through practices where we begin to find those answers for ourselves.
Yeah, and we hear a lot of people say things like, "I'm not flexible enough to do yoga," or they try one type of class, and that's only one class, and they didn't like that. It was too slow, or it was too sweaty, or it was whatever, right? And that continues to just like put yoga into these little boxes. It's such an expansive practice. You can be a lifelong yogi and only do 3 or 2 or 1 asana in your daily practice. You don't have to do sun salutations and moon salutations and 26 posture yoga sequence. We don't have to do any of that, right? I saw a fellow yoga teacher say something yesterday of saying, like, you're not flexible enough to do yoga is like saying you're too dirty to take a bath. And but then as I was thinking about it a bit more deeply, as I tend to do, I thought, it makes sense, of course, like in the very physical surface example of that, right? But then thinking about people saying, I'm not flexible enough to do yoga, they're referring just to the physical body, right? And it's really the mind. It's the mind that's not flexible enough. And so it's like, okay, well, your physical body doesn't need to be flexible. Let's get past that and just get on the mat anyway. Now next is your energetics in your mind. Where's the lack of flexibility there? And then that's where we really get into the yoga as untangling the knots, as they say, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And feel free to use language as you want. Sanskrit is the original language of yoga and Ayurveda and all the Vedas. So if you use Sanskrit language, go for it. I know it wants to come out. I see you
The
translating, but if
grunties.
it, yeah, the grunties. If it comes out, we'll translate, but please, please. And that's what makes, I think, some people so surprised, right? They might come for the exercise or they have their excuse or I'm only doing it for XYZ reason. My back pain and my doctor said to come,
Yeah.
or sleep and it helped my friend get better sleep. And then they come. And of course, if you come for one day, great. But it's a practice. It's meant to be practiced and to integrate and to weave into your life. It's not just something you go to and you leave and that's it. Although some people do that, and you see this a lot, right? They come to class for one thing and then what happens?
They get stuck in a loop, or they get bored of it, burned out. But we also see a lot of, the repetition can be a good thing, but then it gets into like overuse, right? The most common injuries in yoga are
Mm,
overuse, repetitive, over repetition. And so
yeah.
then it's where what happens is it's like the snow sledding hill is people come in, they only want to do, let's say, their Ashtanga sequence at 4:30 a.m., Monday through Thursday, whatever, and that groove gets so deep and it's great. They're really benefiting from it for a while. That repetition can be really, really valuable when we have a lot of chaos in our lives or just a lot of, busyness, whatever. But then it gets hard to create new pathways. And then you're missing out on, oh, but over here is this amazing restorative style or this amazing Kriya practice or Ayurveda or like whatever is over here, but we get so set in doing it just that one way over and over and over again that we're missing the vast ocean that is yoga and all of the many, 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 many different paths we can take within this path.
Yeah, humans like ritual, humans crave understanding patterns. And then they bring all that patterning into this new practice, quote unquote, yoga, only to repeat that same pattern of creating a groove without understanding the fluid nature of yoga, which is it might work for you now, and this is doing great things now. But if you make that groove too deep without honoring that your body's changing, that your mind is changing, that your digestion is changing, that your relationships are changing, you're still stuck in that groove now, and it's time to make a new one, and we think that is the pattern for the rest of our lives, and it's not. We have to be open to the fullness of yoga, which is beyond way beyond the postures, right? The
Yeah.
postures is just one teeny, 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 tiny bit of a greater philosophy, greater compass, a greater map. So what are
Yeah.
other oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's really one of my favorite things to witness in students is, and in my own practice, is seeing how yoga evolves with us. And at
Mm.
different phases and stages in our lives that, maybe our yoga is we're diving into a bunch of awesome books on yoga and topics that go way far beyond what we would ever hear in a general yoga class, right? Or sometimes no matter how much we know about yoga, it's like, I just need to get to my mat and literally just cat and cow and roll around on the floor for a few minutes because I haven't in a while. And it's just this beautiful relationship that we have. And sometimes we're deeply in it. And sometimes it's hot and cold or whatever, but it's always evolving with us. And I really love to have the honor of witnessing students go through their process of initially whatever they arrive into their yoga class or their yoga teacher training with these goals of like by the end of this I want to be able to nail my handstand, or by the end of this I want to be able to better manage my anxiety, whatever it may be. And then seeing how that evolves so much. I mean, there's a million directions that it can go in. I want to serve my community in this particular way, in this particular vein that yoga has saved my life in. Or I want to start a business and do this or that in yoga. I want to write a book. Or I just want to keep my yoga to myself and just enjoy not going so hard with it and really slowing down with it. You see it all, right? You see students
Yeah.
go through so much of their processes and as we have and are still going through in our lives. And that's one of the powerful, magical parts that keeps us coming back to this practice that you and I have been doing for 25 plus years, or
Yeah.
not doing, right? It's that we're living.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because it is a life choice, I would say, in the sense of I know at first I was doing it for very physical reasons. It felt good in
Hmm.
my body. I was very disconnected from my body. And so it brought me into connection with my physical body. So well over 20 years ago. And I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think that's the case with a lot of people is I went to my first class because I was a yes person, I was a people pleaser, and I knew all the trainers at a YMCA, and one of the instructors was like, "Oh, come to my class." And I said, "Yes." I didn't have any idea what was gonna happen. I'd only been to Bikram classes in the past, which I really didn't do because I was just there for the margaritas afterwards with my friends who had taken me, so I was, like, not in the right frame of mind. But this time I showed up completely open-minded. I have no idea what I'm getting into, and everything changed. That one class, everything changed.
I have to tell you and the podcast listeners how I got into yoga because it's
Oh,
pretty funny. Because as you're saying that, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's so funny how when we think back to our first class, when you're somebody who's now taught and attended tens of thousands of classes, and you're like, oh my
yeah.
gosh, that first class or those first few classes." So for me, it was when I was actually my son's age that he is now, like 14. I would spend the night a lot, especially in the summer, over my best friend Rachel's house, and her mom had a Rodney Yee DVD. Or VH no, I think it was a
VHS,
VHS,
it would
actually. I
probably
think
be
it was a
VHS, yeah.
VHS, actually, yeah.
I would like to say you were that young, but I'm pretty sure it was a
I'm
VHS.
pretty sure it was a VHS, and we would put it in just because we thought it was, like, so woo-woo and hilarious, and he was, like, sitting in Sedona on the edge of a rock and, guiding breath and meditation, and we would be, like, half doing it and then just a lot of giggling, right? Like, it's, like, 1 o'clock in the morning, we're just giggling, and then a few years later, my mom wanted to go to a yoga class, and this was in Norfolk, Virginia. And there was a yoga studio there that I think is still there, with the same owner and everything. Like this would have been like or 2000. And she asked me to go with her, and I went with her. And, I was already like on my spiritual seeker path with like philosophy, but I hadn't yet seen like a yoga class in action. And the teacher was just your quintessential yoga teacher with her like Stevie Nicks tassel kind of, robe and like floating around the class and saying a lot of very, floral words and poetic cues and stuff. And I was in between this place of the 29-degree Pisces sun in me was like, oh, this is so deep. I love this. And then the 0 degrees Aries rising in me was like class clown, like trying not to like giggle out loud, looking at my mom like, are you serious? But it's that dichotomy, that polarity within myself, and this is like a perfect roll into Stira and Sukha, that attracted me to this practice, that active part of my mind that was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, this is a joke, right?" Really needed that to go like, "Oh, actually, this is the joke's on me. This is exactly what I need." And then that part of me that just really wanted to go deep was like, "I'm home. I found it again in this lifetime again. Thank God at only, 17, 18 years old, I found it again. I'm here." And yeah. And so then I kind of, started going here to there to yoga classes. But by 19, I was in yoga teacher training. The Satchidananda Ashram, I mean,
Oh,
it started in the late 80s into the 90s. And so they had yoga teacher training going, and there were other ones around the country, certainly not to the volume that there is now, of course. But, there were kind of larger studios around the country that had some yoga teacher trainings at that time. But I think most people, you thought you had to go to India or New York or LA, maybe Miami or something, or like Hawaii or some of these places where there was like established yoga things happening. But now, of course, there's yoga teacher trainings in every town, seemingly. But yeah.
and so when you went to the yoga teacher training, I think this will be really interesting for people. Like, what is a yoga teacher training? What was it for you then? Yeah, I mean, there's people doing their PhDs on this topic, so I'm curious in your experience, what was
Yeah.
your teacher training really about?
Yeah. So when I took yoga teacher training, my entrance to it was a little bit unusual compared to the average person because I was living on that ashram doing work exchange. I initially went there for a 1 month work exchange program, was like, oh my gosh, I've got to stay here. I grew up as a military kid in a very different world. And when I found ashram living, I was like, it's an intentional community. It's yoga based. You're living with monks. You're practicing from 5 a.m. to, you're having scripture studies in the evening and then everything in between. And um, I knew that this is where I needed to be. So I had left college during that time and went to a different type of college, right? My yoga life school. So I was there already for about a year and a half or so before I decided to do teacher training. So I had already been staffing yoga teacher trainings, like helping, not facilitating, helping with grunt work type stuff. So I was around a lot of it, seeing people go through the process, and then eventually was like, okay, I want to do this too. And for me, the process then, I had already had such a foundation of the teachings of yoga through living on the ashram, whereas most people they enter through regular yoga classes, which I had probably only gone to less than 50 before living on an ashram. So again, most people maybe enter by going to classes at a yoga studio or a YMCA, then they have an interest in teacher training. And that's when they kind of learn, like, whoa, yoga is way more than I thought. And they really learn about the deep philosophy. Whereas I was like learning about all the philosophy and studying the sutras and studying other books and other teachings and lineages and concepts and bhakti chanting practice and all of these things every day, and of course the meditation practice. That then by the time I went to teacher training, for me it was more about like kind of filling in the gaps that would allow me to be able to match somebody else. And now at that point I was 20, turning 21 or so. What I realized I was missing from teacher training by the very end, I had had this, incredible foundation before going in. Then I had all of the anatomy. Now I have a little more organization, how to teach a yoga class from start to finish, the arc and the flow and the, multi-level teaching and some of these other things. But what I didn't have was confidence. And I was a generally
Mm.
confident person out in the world, but in regards to teaching yoga, I was one of the youngest in the group for sure. So I was really young and I felt like, who am I? Who am I to teach this to anybody and to go teach people older than me? And like, how can they have any trust or confidence in me? So I initially taught kids because I felt more comfortable there. And then eventually went into teaching of seniors, which I really, really enjoyed. And then kind of the general public. And I would say that I'm at this age now. Even when I was younger, this was my favorite age of human to work with. This transition from your 30s to your 40s through the
Mm.
40s, because we're like, okay, I've operated this way for so many years. And now my body is like, stop. You need to do something different. You need to wake up and start paying attention and start listening. And we need to establish a whole brand new relationship here. And we have a little more space and time if we have the privilege to have more space and time in our lives to focus on ourselves, but with maturity. And so I love this age that I'm at now, but for many years taught this age, but I haven't yet been here. So with teacher training, the thing that I wanted to make sure, amongst many other things, but one of the things was I wanted to make sure that my students were leaving confident teaching any age, any stage of yoga practice, teaching beginners, teaching people who had been practicing for many years. And as I went through the process of like, okay, well, how did I gain my confidence? It's a lot of just like having to do it messy action and just mess it up, right? And just like stutter over your words and then forget where you are and then forget which side you just did and just ask the class, did I just do the left side or the right side? When I took my final for my teacher training, I basically failed it initially. And he was like, all right, well, take some time and we'll do a do over. But it wasn't that I didn't know the information. It was that I just was so nervous and I just couldn't make that connection of letting it come out because I was being such a perfectionist about it. If it wasn't going to come out sounding so eloquent and so perfect, like I was the most knowledgeable yogi in the world, then I couldn't get it out. And I see it happen with people in teacher training all the time. They get in their heads, they get in their own way, everything gets stuck, at the throat. It's not that they haven't learned it, they're learning all the information, but they just can't get get it out in a way where they feel confident doing it. And then you see other people who they're like, I don't know everything about yoga. I just started it. Like I've only been doing it for 2 years, but they can really confidently just share what they know. And so that's really where I went with it. Just share what I know and be okay with not knowing many things. And so that's the kind of the place that, I started coming from in yoga teacher trainings as a facilitator was like, I'm teaching them this amount of yoga, which is a very tiny amount, the tip of the iceberg, encouraging them to teach what they know, be lifelong students, continuing to, you know, refine and refine and refine without this expectation that when you leave teacher training, you have it all memorized and perfected, and now you can perform a yoga class versus really, teach from the heart and teach from a place of embodied practice and knowledge that is evolving into wisdom.
Thank you for sharing your story and that evolution. Something you just said, maybe you've said this, there's so many things we share with each other all the time. And then you say it that one time and it just hits you so hard. But what you just said, performing a yoga class, I don't think I've heard it ever like that until just now. Having been in spaces for decades and all around the world, I know exactly what you mean. I can spot it because I have a trained eye and a sensitivity to it. But for those people who are getting into yoga or don't know and haven't been through training, have no interest in doing a training, what does that mean? Like, how would they know if a teacher was performing versus being a guide, like guiding them to the practice of yoga, which is an internal path? What does that look
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, I want to first say that it is part of the process, right? We have to ride the bike with training wheels on first, but we don't ride our bike for 40 years with our training wheels on. We eventually take them off. And so it's like the mimicking is part of the process that at least my goal as a trainer is for them to do that part of it while still in training. So they are memorizing, they're practicing a sequence that they've created, initially smaller little sequences. They're sort of memorizing like a script in their head initially, and they are performing it, right? For while they're doing their practice teaching and teacher training. And then the goal is that they do that enough that then they're able to step above and beyond that very cerebral experience of repeating, rehearsing, regurgitating, performing a class that you learned in a book or by watching another yoga teacher teach or whatever. So I want to say that because if somebody goes into a yoga class or us as teachers who have been in so many yoga classes and we teach in a very different way now that we've taught so many classes. If I go into a class and I know it's a new teacher and I can tell pretty quickly, and I can tell that the teacher is performing what they've rehearsed many times, then that's okay. That might not be the class I go to every week now for a while because I'm looking for maybe something a little different at this stage in my practice. But also, that's okay. Like, you've got to start somewhere and do it that way, but don't get stuck there. So, the thing that I would say I see happen at times is when people go into yoga teacher training or into their journey of teaching yoga from this place of performative motivation, like they're looking for the external validation or they're looking to be somebody they're not. It becomes disembodied, right? It's disconnected. You're teaching as if you're somebody else. And, once again, we sort of start there. But when we stay there, then people don't resonate with you anymore. And I think that's what happens. And there's many different reasons why many people might not be showing up to our classes, right? Or something. It can be a million different things. It can be the time slot, whatever. But sometimes it's because we're just not teaching authentically. We're not teaching from the centered self. We're teaching from all these different examples that we've seen and that we've absorbed and that we can recreate, and we miss this opportunity with our students to really connect, right? And I know that many of us can say some of our favorite teachers are the teachers who are just like really chill and just mess up a lot, but not in a way where you don't feel safe or confident in them, right? That's a big difference. Not where you're messing up a lot on some of those important things that can put students at risk, or in the sense of trauma informed where we're potentially re-traumatizing folks in the space because we're not being mindful. More so like not getting so stuck on some of the silly things that can happen in a yoga class, like forgetting where you were going next in the sequence or whatever, right? And then just returning to that self and that center. And you can feel it in a teacher when they do it. What I encourage my students to do is like deep exhale, anchor deep into your body. Like everything, all of the noise of the, oh my gosh, what was I going to do in my sequence? I practiced it earlier, but now I forgot it. And da, 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 da. Bring it to center. Teach what you know. What would your body enjoy right now? Keep it simple. It's okay if you messed up, and just allow yourself to move forward with a lot of grace and a lot of love. And like, that's the yoga, right? That's the yoga. Because if we're teaching from a place of like, "Oh, I messed that up. I'm so crappy. I should never teach yoga again. I don't know why I'm doing this." And I see it happen sometimes to people in teacher training, that process of where they're like, they want to drop out initially because they've realized, oh my gosh, it's a lot harder than I thought. From as a student on the mat, thinking like, "Oh, like I've gone to hundreds of yoga classes. I can easily do this at the front of the room." And then they realize it's a lot harder than they think. There's so many plates spinning that you're thinking about, and time management and this and that, and safety and sequencing, and everybody at different levels, and all of the things that are happening. And I think the reminder, and I'll stop it here, is just the more deeply we study ourselves, so our self study, our svadhyaya, the more deeply we study and know ourselves, the more accessible it is to teach from an authentic place. If we're disconnected from ourselves, the class is going to be disconnected. And if part of our goal is to help people reconnect those wires within themselves, brain to body, et cetera, then we have to be committed to our own practice of reconnection, association from dissociation, many years of dissociation, disconnect from the body. So that svadhyaya, that self practice is in self study, and our dedication to our own practice is really the key to, I think, teaching a good, what I say, a good class, like an authentic, safe, coming through the center of the heart of yoga class.
That's gonna be so good for people beginning their journey or along their journey of sharing anything really, not just yoga, but as a new practitioner out there in the world working with people's bodies, you go through that evolution of, "Oh my god, I just learned all this stuff." You feel like a stuffed bird, right? Like learning all this stuff. You're learning, 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 you're taking in, and now it's time to like leave the nest and share it with others. And there is that transition of stumbling over, falling flat on your face, and
Yeah.
recognizing that's part of the process to get back up and do it. But the ultimate goal for all of us, well, okay, I would say all of us, but in this conversation of yoga or a yoga class is really to bring together connection, or to the word yoga,
To
Sanskrit
yoke.
word for to yoke, to bring together. So the ultimate goal for every yoga class, whether it's postural or meditation or breath focused or learning, like you said, with the books, or even singing devotional music, there's so many ways to practice yoga that all of those classes are leading us back to connection with ourself, not the teacher. It's a connection to self.
Yeah, and that's the what you used the word guide, and that's the difference of, we all began as like yoga instructors, right? We have to initially. Some people can transition into that yoga guide almost immediately. And some people it takes time, and I think it's coming from when we establish that inner guide, then we're not just instructing ourselves through life, then we get to step into that place of where we're guiding people in much more than just physical postures. We're guiding people just back to themselves. And really we can't even take that much credit. We're guiding people, we're just reminding people of the guide within themselves that guides themselves back to themselves, right?
For sure, for sure. I'm really glad you said that because it's true. The teacher or the guide, the instructor, the facilitator, we're just a vessel. We're just a vessel. This is how I see it. And I say this all the time with Chinese medicine. You've heard it too. I believe so much in the consciousness of that medicine. It has its own consciousness and it's just using me to come through me. Same with yoga. I mean, there is such a stream of consciousness, of wisdom, of connection, of cosmic intelligence. If you end up guiding others, you have to be a vessel for that and like just trust it so much. Like you have to know yourself and become friends and know that wisdom in such a personal way that it just wants to flow through you.
Yeah, and that self connection, then it's like the figure eight, the infinity, right? It's like the self connection. Then, as we develop that, then we further develop our ability to connect externally, to connect with the trees, to connect with our loved ones, to connect in relationship, to connect with our practice and with our asana. It's an interesting thing, right? And so, as much as we can say yoga is so much more than asana, that's just such a tiny part of it. It's also a huge part of it at the same time, right? It's a huge part of it. And that return to our asana practice that can look so different from day to day and so different from decade to decade in our lives, that return to it is the foundation still, and the breath, of course, for these other parts in the full philosophy school of thought and science that it is.
For those of us who entered through the physical practices of asana, the postures, the breath, the move, the somatic, the body, using the body, um, it is part of that holistic perspective of body, energetic body, intellectual, pranic, the myokosha, that there's these different aspects of ourself. We separate them by name, but it's all interconnected. And
Yeah.
we have to use the physical body. We're here in a body. We need to keep that meat suit, as I love to call it, balance every decade. We have to change how we're physically moving in our body from decade to decade because that's naturally going to change. It's part of
Yeah.
nature and nature changes and has its seasons and so do we. I have a big question for you. What's your favorite teaching? What's the teaching that, if you can have a favorite teaching from the Vedas, from the lineage of yoga, that fundamentally changed your life?
When I initially learned it in my teacher training, they only brushed over it, and then I really learned it from you. You were the one who brought the concept of Stira and Sukha really to the forefront of my mind when you were coming in and working with my early teacher training groups. And you had such an emphasis on it, and I had only heard it as like, "Oh, it's one of the sutras, it's kind of how we, come into our asana," right? It was more focused on that, but I had never seen it woven into life. So Stira and Sukha, that it comes from Sutra 2.46 in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and it's Stira Sukham Asanam, and it's that the yoga posture should be steady and comfortable. And that's the way that I initially learned it, was exactly that. The asana should be steady and comfortable. Okay. And we kept moving, right? We kept going in yoga teacher training. And then you put a lot of emphasis on it and it cracked it wide open for me. And that has been in my life throughout yoga teacher training, throughout my own practice, throughout many, many challenges with physical health, with, mental health and anxiety stuff. And like, so, my professional world, my role as a mother, the balance of those qualities in like Buddhism, the middle way, as we relate it to the title of your podcast, the yin and the yang. And it's the balance of the qualities of stira being effort and sukha being ease. And we can see it shows up in so many different ways. Those qualities can be steadiness and joy and the like the bones in our body being the stira and the tissues and the muscles being the sukha and the Goldilocks effect, I call it. The not too much, the not too little, just right. Not too hard, not too soft, just right. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. And we could weave it into everything we've talked about already here, which is, let's just talk about the yoga teachers coming in and, they're nervous and they're struggling with confidence and so on. If they try too hard, then, we that shows, right? Then we flub it up even more, right? When we're trying too hard. If we don't prepare as a yoga teacher, then we really mess it up, right? And we put our students at risk if we just come in unprepared, like, oh, I'm just going to wing it. Now, when you've been teaching for 20 years, you can just walk in and wing it because our library within is so developed, right? But as a new yoga teacher, you want to put in effort, but you don't want to put in so much effort that you freak yourself out and your mind goes blank because you're in the fight or flight and freeze state, right? So Stira shows up as the direction too, like focus and direction. And so when we're communicating with intention, communicating firmly or directly, but also and attentively, but also the softness and the care and the tenderness and the attunement as we're communicating and not just like communicating through and over people, right? Or how that quality shows up in the mind. We want to show up in our day with some, we've got a to-do list, we have things we want to take care of. We've got to have some sort of focus in order to get that done. And if again, like, just force ourselves with, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do this, I have to do that. And if I don't get this done, then, and then we speak poorly to ourselves, then we go out of balance. That's where dis-ease comes in, right? The analogy that I love for this, and there's so many much more refined yogic ones that I've heard through the years, the broccoli and the fork analogy for Stira and Sukha is the one that I like to use a lot. I don't know if you've heard this. So if one needs to eat, because we're in these human bodies and we have to live, right? So we have a piece of perfectly cooked broccoli on a plate, and we have a fork in our hand. And if we, with all of our might and with all of our force and everything we have, we drive the fork down really hard into the plate, we're going to miss the broccoli. The plate and the broccoli are going to go flying, right? Goal not achieved. If we hold the fork flopsy wopsy like this, and we sort of just go like this over it, the fork can never penetrate, stab the broccoli enough to really be able to pick it up. So it's like we're not using our tools in the way that they're meant to be used. That we have to have direction. We have to find that balance of how much strength and how much softness. And a baby has to learn that when they're, learning to eat. Like we give the baby a plastic fork and a tray of peas, and we know what happens, right? Initially, because they're learning, the balance of strength and force and softness and slowing down and all of that. And we're still figuring it out in so many aspects of our lives, how to not burn ourselves out by going too hard, but also not ever, the other side of that is not ever making any progress because we're not trying, or we're not putting in enough effort. And the other thing I want to bring into that is, I think one of the things that I've pondered so much with this practice of Stira and Sukha, similarly to the yin and the yang, it's not just that it's two separate, halves. There's a little bit of each in either, right? There's a little bit of the black circle in the white side. And so, the Sukha being the void and the Stira being the material, we're meant to have, like Green Tata, one foot in both realms, right? We're not meant to just be on one end of it. Like, I'm just going to put in a whole lot of effort, just steer. We're meant to also have the Sukha, vice versa. And when we really get into the subtleties of this practice, they're all interwoven. We're not really meant to be, let's say the example is like how we can apply it to a yoga class is the general picture would be the asana is the stira, the savasana is the sukha, right? But then the next layer that's deeper is, well, within each asana is Okay, the effort to get into it is the Stira. Then every inhalation is the Stira, the effort. Every exhalation is the Sukha. When we settle into a pose, there's a there's some Sukha happening, but then it's okay, realign, readjust. My body's telling me now do this, Stira again. And now, okay, next exhalation, settle in, sink in a little bit more, maybe rest my head down a little. The pose deepens a bit. Okay, now adjust a little bit more. Next inhalation, Stira again, maybe bring in some sort of concept here of like the edge and playing with the edge, that's effort. But then once again, surrender. So we're doing like the micro dance of Stira and Sukha within the gross practice of the Stira and Sukha. And we can just go on and on and on from there, but I'll stop there.
No, it goes on forever. It goes on infinitely. And this is where we geek out all the time. You can just go down the rabbit hole of the Stira Sukha within the Stira Sukha within the Stira Sukha, or another way of
That's it.
saying that, the yin and the yang within the yin and the yang within the yin and the
Yeah.
yang. I mean, it all ends up becoming one micro macro reflection of this concept.
It wasn't something that I learned a lot in yoga teacher training, as I said, or that they went really deeply into. So you like really planted that seed. And then now I see it in everything. I see it in everything that I do.
I mean, everything,
Everything.
like you're the way that you are a mom, in on the
Everything.
news, everything.
Everything.
And
Everything.
so it gives you a framework for bringing what? Like, if you see it in everything, let's, because I know we live it, a lot of people are having a hard time right now just doing basic things like watching the news. That used to be something no one ever worried about. That did not bring us stress just 10, 20 years ago. And well, let me rephrase that. If you were watching the news without stress, you probably had a lot of privilege, let's be honest. But now everyone is just, so for like news, bring Stira Sukha into something, and it doesn't have to be news. It can be something else, like being a mom, something that resonates with you and how you take that philosophical teaching and apply it to your life.
Yeah, I think, as cliche as it sounds for us yogis to say, it's all about balance. And it really is. It really is that, we're constantly on this seesaw of life. And another Sanskrit word I'll bring in here is the name of my company, Tula, which is the distribution of weight. And so it's like the scales, like the Libran scales, not too much weight in one pot versus the other, on one side versus the other. So it's how are we distributing the weight? And so where Stira and Sukha shows up is not too much, not too little, just right. And so as far as news goes, that example would be if you all throughout your day, depending on what your job is, if you're having to be in some really, they're very Stira based phone calls, Zoom meetings, making hard decisions, these types of things that are very mind, you're really not in your body, you're having to take in a lot of information, or you have a really rough commute, and then there's just a lot of input from all of these other sources coming in. Watching the news first thing when you get home might not be the best thing. You need some balance, right? So we need to constantly be checking in with ourselves, and how we relate that to the mat is in each pose, right? Constantly be checking in with ourselves in each moment, with each breath. So continuing to check in with ourselves of, is this the right time for me to sit and then like watch the news? I'll give you an example too. I spend a lot of time at times with my parents, visiting them and extended visits and so on. And they still, bless their hearts, watch the news during dinner. And I have to say, like, I have to ask them, guys, can we turn it off during dinner? And, this is an example of where we can create imbalance because we are digesting our food, we're digesting the news. And if you've watched the news lately, you see it's a lot of really rough, difficult stories to take in, to metabolize, to digest, to have to witness and see and hear about. these awful things that are happening. And I'm not even referring to just the political stuff. I'm just referring to, especially if you live in a big city, the day in and day out of violence that's happening and missing people and, these things. And so creating more balance in our lives, if that's the key, then it's okay. My eyes have seen enough today. Our eyes take in so much content on our phones and through so many things out in the world. We're driving miles and, we're not meant to take in this much through these eyes, is my belief. We take in so much that we have to know when our body is taken in enough and now needs the balance. We need to put some weight over into the other side, which is like cooking a meal, listening to music, closing the eyes, taking some time in meditation, staring at a fire if you have the ability to, turn on and or have your fireplace on or something like that. And then it shows up in all these other areas of our life. You mentioned like motherhood. I'm the mom of a teenager right now. And the harder I try to push his will, for me to get the product that I'm looking for. Like, I want you to bring your dishes down from your bedroom and wash them and dry them and put them all the way on the drying rack. I want you to do the whole thing, right? And if I just push and push and push and then I end up getting irritable, angry, and I'm coming from this place and then now I'm saying it in a forceful way. But on the other end, he's not applying enough effort, enough stira, and all of a sudden he goes, my son, like, "Whoa, mom, where did that come from?" kinda thing, right? And so it's like, okay, I'm now forcing. Now I'm in overdrive, I'm in force, I'm bringing in too much of the spirit, and he's not putting in enough effort. So I need him to meet more in the middle, more effort, and I need to bring myself back into a place of like, do those things really matter that much? And is the continuing to amplify the force going to get me to the end goal anyway? No, it's not. It just furthers the imbalance, right?
Right, right.
One of the things as I was pondering and reflecting and thinking about this as we were approaching the podcast was for me in my life in the last couple of years, it has been around stability. I've had and was okay with the instability of, with being military family, like moving a lot. And I was a military kid. We moved our whole lives. And so stability was uprooted very often, right? And so all of the ways that stability shows up in my life and in the ways that we as a family are contributing to the stability of the home, right? And how much I've put the focus on stability in the last couple of years, especially, and stability in myself, stability in relationships, stability in the way that I parent, and, all of these things, finding stability in a world that often doesn't feel very stable. But then the other side of that is we have to remember the importance of the joy too, of the softness, of the surrender that sometimes things aren't going to feel fully stable and that's okay or the stability is going to be shaken up a bit and yeah, so remembering that with this desire for the stira because it can feel safe, most safe, right? The effort, the striving, the strength, I feel strong, so therefore I can protect myself, I feel safe, the stability, all of that stuff can give us a sense of safety. But then if we forget that there's the other side, there's the yin, there's the surrender, there's the joy, there's the actual being able to experience the reward of it, which is just being. All this doing for what? To actually be able to enjoy the being, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that'll be very helpful for a lot of people. It also reminds me of, I would say, like the other archetype on the other side of that same coin, which is the type of person who's always just going with the flow,
Right.
right? So much ease, like, oh, I'll just go here, like a hummingbird. Oh, I'll go here. What's over here? Attracting my attention. And then, oh, over here. And oh, I'll move here. 6 months later, then I'm moving here. And then a year later, I want to move it, just like going with the flow so much that it actually creates instability,
Yeah.
right? There's a thing of being too flexible or too go with the flow, which we also see a lot in some healing spaces and yoga spaces, and not just those spaces, but like, especially if there's a paradigm that's introducing this balance, it's almost like the pendulum can swing. If you've grown up a certain way, then you learn or have permission to explore this other, but then you go all in that way, it can also be destabilizing or out of balance. So, yeah, like you said, using the practice, like using our own yoga practice is a way we're constantly checking in. That's that mindfulness part, right? Or if we want to use that word, that checking in, that presence part to say, what's going on now? Without judgment, just what's going on? Like, what am I observing? And then based on what you're observing, maybe I don't change anything. Or maybe
Yeah.
you recognize there's too much of one way or the other and we can adjust.
Mhm.
But yeah, I know I think that I really identify almost with the other side. Oh, I both sides, but like pendulum for many years where it's like
Mhm.
so rigid, so go, 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 so hustle, so proving to the world. And then totally the other way, which is like, I'm gonna go with the flow wherever spirit takes me. And then, the last, like you said, this last decade of our lives in our 30s, 40s, which has been I feel like this is what I've been craving. This is what I was craving in my 20s. This is what I was
Mhm.
craving in my late teens, is this balance between the two where it's not one or the other. It's and both. And there's a time and a place,
Yeah.
and the practice of pendulating, or is that even a word?
It
Of
is
flowing
now.
from moving from one to the other and allowing them to be in relationship with each other. It's not an either or. It's like
Right.
Stira and Sukha.
Yeah. I feel like that go with the flow archetype, another way that that shows up is lots of creative ideas and no action, right? So
Oh yeah.
I want to write a book and I want to do this and I want to do that and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, but if we never put the pen to the paper or we never start, it never happens. And another
Yeah.
way that that shows up too, that comes to mind as you were talking in wellness spaces and holistic spaces is when we embark on our spiritual journey, those of us who are wellness or our holistic practices are connected in some way to our spiritual practice. When we embark on our spiritual practice, we all start from many different places. And I feel like what I see a lot and have experienced within my own self in the past too, especially when I was younger and didn't have such an established sense of self or groundedness, yet got on a spiritual practice that was all a spiritual path that was all focused on transcendence. And so then I'm getting further and further and further and further out of my body. Even though I'm practicing yoga, I'm really practicing in a very dissociated way, getting more and more what we often refer to as like in spirit, right? In spirit. And it's not grounded enough. So again, back to that like one foot in each realm. I think it's a beautiful thing when we can fully pour ourselves into a project with so much effort, right? And I think it's such a beautiful thing when we can really learn the art of total melted surrender. Just like, I'm not doing anything. I'm just resting unapologetically. And we need that. And to whatever extent you were over striving over here on the Stira side of things, you may need a whole lot of rest and recuperation in the Sukha realm, but we've got to remain grounded. And I think that's really key. We can bring it back to the asana that no matter what yoga pose we're doing, something is grounded. Something is supporting us in the pose. Even the poses where our feet are up in the air, we're still grounding into something. The foundation is still there. We're still having to support ourselves with a sense of connection to the earth beneath us. And I think that when it comes to this dance of Stira and Sukha and the balance of these qualities, this idea that Sukha, you know, is for those of us who are like the overachieving, go, go, go types, right? We need to fall into the void. We need to explore the infinite Akashic space. But we can also get really lost on that side too, where we're not grounded enough, where there's no direction, there's no organization.
I like that you said that, the dance of Stira Sukha, because it is. It's an ongoing relationship between the 2 constantly repeating. Yeah.
Yeah, it shows up in our relationships as, being too passive, right? Too yielding.
Mhm.
And when that happens, we get walked over and we enable. And
Yeah,
then we see, codependence come up and, we're
yeah.
being too flexible, too pliable. In an effort to not be too rigid, so we're swinging, we're, as you said, pendulating, to the other end. Yeah.
And it's really interesting to think of this from a health perspective, because you're training in yoga therapy, therapeutic yoga. Just real quick for people who don't understand that language, how is yoga therapy or therapeutic yoga training different from what we've been talking about?
Yeah, it's more of a deeper study from what we understand as, let's say, a general public like yoga class, a general yoga class that could be many different styles, right? Hatha, vinyasa, whatever. Where yoga therapy comes in is more specified, when we think about the word therapeutic, it's a more specified method towards greater wellness. So, when we're getting into more therapeutics, you might be focusing on people who are coming in at risk for something, whether it's post surgery, chronic pain issues, PTSD, many different things, TBI, traumatic brain injury, all of these different things. And so, you're coming in with more of an educational depth of, okay, how can I serve and teach people who may have experienced these things and be able to meet them where they're at and be able to move the needle further towards it being a beneficial practice to them, because that general, what I'm referring to as like a general public yoga class, is not always beneficial to everybody. It just isn't.
Right.
And, that term like yoga is for everybody. It is. If you can breathe, you can do yoga. And not every yoga class is for everybody. It's not that people aren't welcome. It's not about exclusivity. It's more so about, yes, you can get a little of what you need, or we can go deeper and we can address more of what's actually happening in the body, in the mind, et cetera. And we can meet it with more tools, with deeper and greater knowledge of how we can work with these different conditions, whether it's a mental health, physical health, emotional wellness, and so on. So that's where the therapeutics come in. And there's many different focuses in yoga therapy too that people go into, focusing more in like hospital environments or oncology, working with folks that are in remission from cancer. And then my area that I've been focusing on is the nervous system and post trauma care.
That'll be helpful for people who are trying to refer or recommend yoga classes to their clients or their patients, and having a little more understanding between just saying, "Oh, go to a yoga class," versus, "I want you to look for someone," or they're looking to create a referral network in their community of someone who might have more of that yoga therapeutic background or working with a particular condition or conditions that meet their clients' individual needs.
There's a there's a really important relationship here to what we're talking about to steer and Sukha. And so how that shows up is if a student comes to a yoga studio and says, my life is crazy. I have so much going on. I have a ton of anxiety. Like I'm constantly on the move. I don't have a lot of time. My doctor or my therapist says that I should do yoga. What do you recommend? My friend said that, she really loves hot yoga. So I'm thinking about trying that. Obviously, we can't put the full responsibility on the person at the front desk at the yoga studio either. So, take this example with a grain of salt. But let's say I'm that person that this, prospective student is inquiring to, I'm going to want to know a little more information and potentially the style of yoga that they are attracted to off the bat. that initially they're like, oh, no, no, no. I don't want one of those slow classes, like those restoratives or whatever. Like, I cannot lay there like that. Like, I want to do the one, that like moves really fast and that you sweat a lot and we get a good workout or whatever, right? We've heard that a lot. And here's what I want to say about that is okay, if that's where they need to be met because they're living in Rajasic, like when we're talking about the gunas, Rajasic can be the like Stira to the extreme, if you will. They're a little bit different, but too much force to the extreme, we get into Rajasic, irritable, kind of overactive energy. Tamasic, for those who, are listening and aren't familiar with the gunas, tamasic energy is like the extreme of it is collapse. So just doing nothing, lethargy, and then the middle way is sattva, the right balance of both. And so if folks are coming in and wanting to start a yoga practice and they have a very active mind, yes, we know what they probably really need is something really chill to balance. However, that's probably not where they're going to be able to start because it's too you're trying to swing the pendulum to the other end and that's not the best way to create balance, right? That can send people over the edge as far as imbalance goes, and then that might be that example of where someone's like, I tried yoga. I didn't like it. It wasn't for me. Because now we've had them go into a class that their mind is too active, their body is too restless, and we're wanting them to stay, you know, on a yoga twist on one side for 8 minutes. And they're like, absolutely not. I need to get out of here, And so that's why I'm also a big believer in hatha yoga, which is the sattvic, the middle way, where it's not this super fast moving vinyasa and it's not this super, super slow restorative. It's in the middle. You can move a little briskly or you can move a little slower and it can kind of meet people in either place. Wanted to share that about needing to meet us where we're at. And also, there's magic in the style of class you may be avoiding. Not always. Sometimes we need to avoid it because that's where we're going to get injured. We don't have to go by that rule of like you've heard the saying, the pose you're avoiding is the one you need most. I don't subscribe to that. Even if I said that several times many years back before I, learned better, right? Sorry to any of those students who I said that to you in the past. I take it
Me
back.
too.
Yeah, I take it back. That was me being a little too in the Stira, trying to challenge you, but really it's the pose that feels right in the moment is the pose that's best for you, or the class that feels right now, where you're able to be in there and not feel like you want to jump out of your skin. That's the best one right now.
I think that's so wise and also a really good food for thought too of what we're attracted to, right? Like attracts like. So if you're a go-getter, you're on that hustle, you're in the inertia of go, go, go. It feels good to still be in the go in a fast paced class. And yet, what again, coming back to the philosophy and wisdom that yoga, Chinese medicine, so many of the cultural practices around the globe remind us is we can't always be in the go. We can't always be in rest. There's a time and a place, and not too
Yeah.
much, not too little, just right. And I will add to that, not too much, not too little, just right. That just right is different for absolutely every single person on this planet.
Yeah.
So we need a journey. I'm going to circle back to your mom here. We need a book on how to live. We need a manual for how to live. But you couldn't do that because for as many people as there are on this planet, there's that many ways of being.
Yes.
So we need a guide, we need a map. And for you and I, yoga has been such a steady map, a dependable map that no matter what stage of life we've been in, no matter what roles we've been placed in, no matter what emotional uplifting place or emotional falling apart place we've been to, it's been a steady map that always brings us back to center, that allows us to find at some point space and reflection and learning and coming back to our center and growth and dare I say peace and bliss, but yes to those as well.
Mhm.
So I think that's so funny that you started it by saying your mom is like, "We need a manual for life," and here you're like, "Found one, mom."
Yeah, so I say that a lot of times when teaching, and people are like, there's no manual to living life. But eventually when I found the Yoga Sutras, I was like, oh. There actually
That's
is, and it's thousands of years old. It's very old. And so many things that we're seeing in the modern day in medicine, in wellness spaces, exercise spaces, ceremonial spaces, so on and so on and so on, right? It's all bringing us back to this information that has been available to us for a long time, that the yogis have known about for a long time. The Vedas have been tuned in to this wisdom. And I do want to mention, because I think it's really important here too, that the sutras and some of these other teachings of yoga, they have gone through the historical process of also developing through patriarchy. Many, 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 many teachings fell by the wayside that were by and for women.
Mhm.
There was a lot of, like, sanitation of it to fit a particular class of people, and while we can say, like, "Okay, this is a manual for life," also with the understanding that it doesn't mean it's all correct, and it doesn't mean that it's that we have to subscribe fully because the book says it, this is the way to do it. We have to also have our connection to our internal wisdom and intuition and knowing that, well, this doesn't apply to me anymore. Like, I'm not going to put the string through my nose, like it says in the Kriyas or some of these other practices in there, just because, like, oh, maybe that's just something that I don't want to practice. So, yes, it's a manual to life, and ultimately, we're the guide. It's a
Yeah, because
framework.
it's a framework and it is bringing you back to yourself. And
Right.
when you are operating from a place of self rather than all the voices of others or external validation or shoulds because it's family, culture, time, place, the waters you're swimming in, when you come back to yourself, you slowly begin to differentiate between your own inner voice and those other external factors. And
Yeah,
that's very empowering. It also cultivates that discernment where you can
absolutely.
begin to look at a book. And before you might look at a book, I did this too. You read a book, you're like, oh, that was a yoga master. This worked. I'm going to do everything that book says, right? Dot the I's, cross the T's. I'm a good little practitioner student, yogi, and do it all exactly that way. But without that discernment, you actually pull yourself into more disharm or out of balance.
Absolutely. And we can apply that right back to what's happening on our mats. If the teacher says, okay, everybody, let's all come into tree pose, and your knee's been bothering you, and the tree's just not feeling good that day to balance on that leg, it's all optional. Don't do it. Do something else, stand in mountain, just do it on the one side. It's all optional. But when we first start in our yoga practice, we take it so literally. Whatever the teacher says, we do it. And so there's this process, and for some people it happens quickly, for some people it takes a long time, of really coming into that self empowerment and the self discernment of being able to choose in the moment and have that sense of empowered agency. And hopefully the teacher is encouraging that. We want to see more and more and more of that, of teachers encouraging agency, encouraging options and choice, and us having the in the moment the courage and the knowing and trust in ourselves to discern, no, not this pose for me, not today. And that's how we, you know move ourselves continuously towards the benefits, the true benefits of yoga, which is exactly that, living and showing up in our lives with a sense of empowerment, with a sense of confidence, with strongly refined discernment, protecting ourselves from injury, not just doing something because somebody says to do it, or being just passive and not standing in for ourselves in the moment, speaking up, even if that means just in the moment. It's not necessarily speaking it out loud in a class, but just going like, nope, not for me today. And that can be the way that that happens, or in the beginning of class, telling the teacher something that they may need to know to better serve you in the class. And this is again bringing us back to how yoga is showing us all the ways to live our lives. And so to be yogis is not to be able to twist your body into a pretzel. It's to walk through our lives with the goal of balance, of experiencing ourselves confident and empowered and feeling strong, also experiencing ourselves as soft and comfortable. We don't always just have to be living in discomfort, right? So
Right.
soft and enjoy experiencing the space for joy in our lives and spaciousness in our lives. And like that's being a yogi.
And pleasure too.
Pleasure, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I have one more question. You shared with us, and I know this about you, is that you have such a social justice heart. And when I say that in the sense of you care for others so much. Sometimes to a fault, you forget to care for yourself because you just care for others so much. And you've brought yoga into places and spaces to communities that might not otherwise have access to yoga because it's too expensive or the clothing or the stigma around it. I'd love for you to just share why yoga is for everybody, but not every yoga class is for everybody, and tie that into this work you do, bringing it to diverse community everywhere you've lived.
Yeah.
Why is that important to you? What does that look like? Because I think so many people are just focused on the yoga class and they're like, oh, wait, what? There's more?
Yeah. Well, I want to first say that a lot of these things were things that, as a cis white woman that was teaching yoga, that I had no awareness around. And so, shout out to the students, fellow teachers, and so on through the years, including you, especially other BIPOC folks in the yoga community that brought things to my awareness, knowing that I was somebody who was going to be open to hear and wanted to learn. And I feel like I've positioned myself in a way of like, I'm not above you. I'm not superior to you as maybe the facilitator or teacher. I'm just as much your student. And so that's where I position myself. And I feel like through that, I've had a lot of people share with me their experiences that I certainly have cannot relate to in this lifetime, but do have a big heart for wanting to help in some way. How can I help? And learning how to do it in a way that was not centering myself, not performative, not some of these undertones of privilege that were coming through and fragility, white fragility. And like I had to learn a lot quickly, and there's still so much more to learn. But through that process, specifically in regards to some of these populations that I've worked with, I really just had to be open to listening because I can't come from the place of knowing exactly how to serve a community that I've never been in, right? And that I can't relate to. So it's having open dialogue and communication, a lot of humility. Of I'm a good mover and shaker, and I'm a leader, and I like starting and running businesses. I like doing those types of things. And so here's the things I can do. Tell me what the need is. Tell me where the need is. Let's take the next steps, which often it doesn't automatically mean that it's me going out and teaching these classes because representation is so important. So it's helping to be a connector and to amplify these other folks in the community who have a desire to come in and teach and are looking for an avenue to come in. For example, through teacher training and through the nonprofit, one of the big focuses was creating more access and dissolving a lot of the barriers for people of color, for survivors of trauma, for many other populations to be able to access teacher training, which, as we know in today's day and age, is a privilege. And the schedule, the money, being able to have the time and space for it and the finances for it and all of that can be a huge barrier. So that was a big part of it. As far as the population that I can relate to is being as a survivor of abuse and having experienced a lot of trauma in my life. And that's really where it began for me, was when trauma informed yoga wasn't really much of a thing yet. We were really only seeing that kind of work being done with veterans very early on. I know you were involved with like Connected Warriors or one of those groups. Which one were you involved with?
Connected Warriors.
Yeah. And there was a few others back in this time of like, 2012, 13, 14 when I opened my studio. I have veteran parents with PTSD who served in the war in Iraq. So like I have that connection to veterans, but I'm not a veteran. I have my past with trauma and was experiencing yoga classes that were not didn't feel safe, or that there was many aspects of it that were fine, but then there were some things that were absolutely not fine and not okay and not feeling safe in my body and in my system. And it's very quick for us to be like, oh, there's something wrong with us. This place isn't for me. That, right? Like, I shouldn't come here. And that happens to people all the time in yoga spaces. And so part of my goal from early on was, even though I opened a yoga studio initially to be a boutique yoga studio and had no knowing that I was going to devote my whole world of as a yoga studio owner and teacher trainer to accessibility, to adaptive yoga, to trauma informed, to social justice informed yoga, any of that, the need was so clear that there was no way that I could ignore it. The need was so in my face, there was no way that I could ignore it. So, wanting to create more inclusive spaces and wanting to create spaces that allowed more people more access and more of a clear path to experience the benefits that I know and believe in so wholeheartedly. I'm still moving through that process of also how do we do that in a way that's sustainable, because that's the other thing, and that's how we can tie in the Stira and Sukha here is I swung the pendulum to the other end for the latter half of that 10, 15 years of wanting things to be so accessible, offering, all the scholarships I could and working so hard to dissolve these barriers and so on, that I didn't have enough support in place. And so I experienced deep burnout, which we see very often in the wellness space, holistic spaces, nonprofit spaces, these spaces where we're the givers, we want to help, we're the helpers, we're the supporters, and we are not necessarily showing up perfectly or from the place of knowing all of the experiences. We're still very humbly learning. The intention and the effort is there, and we have to all figure out the balance of supporting ourselves as well. Otherwise, the structures fall apart. And then now we're not able to serve those populations anymore because, whatever, the business can't sustain itself, or they're starting to not be able to show up as well anymore because we're burning out. Too much Stira. So the heart is
Yeah.
there, but then just too
Yeah.
much Stira. So
Yeah.
it's important. I see it. I'm still supporting a lot of spaces now. I'm not at the front, but more in the background and supporting spaces. And I'm seeing it with as an ally, and I'm seeing it with yeah, many folks that I know that are representing these communities and these spaces that are experiencing a lot of burnout. And so I aim to continue to remind the need for sustainable supports in there. Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
there's still so
And
much to
I
be done.
I know, really, and I would, from my space, my perspective, my experience, you are such an ally. You are one of the few people I've been able to go to, sometimes with my own confusion as being a mixed Asian American in America, and I come to you and I'm like, "Where are the Asians in Asian medicine? Where are the Asians in yoga?" And you sit there so humbly and so openly to listen
Mm,
and to contemplate without the answers. So I just want to affirm and reflect that you are such an ally, and that I'm so grateful for your willingness
thank you.
to be in those uncomfortable places and really grow and learn and recognize in a way that is hard to do.
Yeah.
People don't like to be pushed out of their comfort zone. And I mean, maybe this is why we're soul sisters is we kind of run towards the discomfort maybe too much, and we're learning in our wiser years that maybe we don't always have to run towards everything that's on fire. But yeah, I just want to reflect that back to you and thank you. It's so fun being your friend because I know that you care so much and that you will truly listen without having an answer or judging. And so thank you. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
you're welcome. It's that
Yeah.
willingness too to not have the answers and to mess up. I've messed up so much in crossing into the very what for me is a very uncomfortable space of allyship and of working with these communities to show up in a way that is of service. And I've messed it up many times. I've misgendered folks that have told me their pronouns and said something that I didn't realize was coming from a place of ignorance or not knowing or and I'm open to being corrected and taught. And so I continue to anchor into that it's okay to mess it up. What matters the most is that we continue to show up and for me, there's just no choice. There's just no real option. It's hard for me to wrap around and understand that there are folks who aren't trying to help, right? And aren't allies because to me there's just no option there. Like, of course I'm here to help. And of course I want to do, everything I can in my power and, utilize my areas of privilege to help bring things into balance that are desperately in need of balance.
Well, thank you. Is there anything else that you feel is on your heart that you want to share?
No, this has been wonderful, and I know we can go on and on. And this is I don't know if we mentioned in the beginning, my first ever podcast. I've been asked to be on a few, and it just didn't feel right. And I don't also love to be on camera, and I don't love to be recorded and on the spot. I put a lot of pressure on myself. So this has been, breaking through a glass ceiling for me. And you have been that invitation and so many things in my life. And I'm just so grateful to you for that, for inviting me to move through yet another portal of discomfort into, a place of heck yeah, I did it. And this was wonderful. And I can't wait to do it again. So thank you.
Well, you have an open door. I'm just so grateful for your willingness to step into that vulnerable space of sharing your voice and your wisdom with us. But I know that people will really resonate from a variety of different perspectives and backgrounds, and it's going to make a difference. So thank you. Thank you. Before we move into rapid fire, if people want to reach out and connect with you, is there a way? What's the best way that they can connect with you or follow you, or how can they find you?
I have an Instagram that I'm happy to share on here, and I know you'll probably put it in the notes as well. But that's life, dot as dot Katie. So life dot as dot Katie, and it says Catie Oliveira. And so that's where I'm kind of keeping up with things right now. I went through,
And it's Katie with a C.
yeah, Katie with a C. Yes, sorry. Life dot as dot Katie with a C. Yes. I went through a little over a year ago a full on social media hacking of my business accounts, personal account, all of that. And it's a blessing and a curse, right? It kind of
Yeah.
cleared and cleansed my whole social media world. And I had to start all over again. And because of that, I don't have my business accounts back yet. I'm working on it. But if I do have that, then we could add that to the notes for my company for Tula Yoga and Healing Arts.
No worries. Yeah, I remember that. That was so I mean, as someone who also has their own projects and businesses, that was quite the hurdle, quite the teacher the universe threw at you. And
I know.
yeah, the ripple effects just go on and on. Much to learn from that. Are you open to a rapid fire before we go, or do you gotta go?
No, I'm good. Let's do it.
You're good? Okay, let's do it. Thank you. Best advice you ever received?
Hmm. It's a controversial one, but I would say suffering is optional.
Worst advice you've ever received?
Never go to bed angry. Just go to bed angry. You'll feel better in the morning. Just let it, yeah. Yeah.
All right. Do you consider yourself a morning bird or a night owl?
Definitely night owl.
What is your favorite food treat?
Pickled vegetables.
Yum. What's your favorite tea?
Hibiscus.
Do you have a book? Well, you may have already said it, but a book that changed your life or your mindset?
I'm a big reader, so many, really hard to choose, but I am going to say The Way of the Rose
Finish the sentence. Be the type of person who.
is always willing to learn and go deep.
What would you do if you weren't doing the current work you're doing today?
Hmm. If I could like start all over again and maybe take a different path, it would be like astrophysicist or anthropologist.
Whoa, I love it. In many ways, you are
Yeah.
so connected with the stars. You just do it in your own
I
special
do
way. Yeah.
absolutely do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Finally, what is your one wish for healthcare?
While still appreciating and understanding the need for modern medicine, I would say it's a return to the ancient wisdom and the medicines of our ancestors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So much love and adoration coming your way. You're such a sister. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I just adore you and am so grateful to be on this show and to experience what you're doing and what you're building. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. If you're still listening, thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with someone who would appreciate it. Your support helps create positive ripples in our communities. If you want to continue the conversation, if you have questions for the guest or the host, if you want to explore more, please visit substack.com and look for us at Yinspired, Yinspired. Please subscribe, and with your free subscription, you'll receive every new episode, plus access to transcripts, show notes, the resources, links, guest bios, and the opportunity to join the discussion with your comments. From my heart to yours, create a day you love. This podcast is for entertainment, education, and inspirational purposes only. Nothing in this podcast is diagnostic or direct medical advice and does not establish a practitioner patient relationship. Seek care from a highly trained medical provider for your healthcare concerns.